Hi, I'm Bryce Newmeyer with Gates Corporation, and today I'll be demonstrating how to make 100 R14 hose assemblies using Gates C14 hose and couplings.
First, let's go through the steps of the hose and coupling assembly. The first step is to cut the hose to the desired length. After you've determined the hose cutoff length required, you are then ready to cut the hose. Lay the hose out flat and mark where it needs to be cut. You are then ready to cut the hose. The most preferred method of cutting C14 hose is with a metal cutting shear. Place the hose in the cutting shear and make the cut where you marked the hose. Inspect the cut to ensure that it is square and clean. Insert the ferrule from the coupling into the insertion die holder with the tapered end down. Select the appropriate sized hose insertion dies and place them over the ferrule with the internal taper towards the ferrule. Take the hose, push, and rotate the hose through the dies into the ferrule until it stops. Remove the hose with the ferrule attached. Check the hose and braid to ensure they are properly inserted against the internal stop of the ferrule. Once the ferrule has been installed onto the hose, you will need to use a hose expander to expand the tube inside of the hose. Take the appropriate sized hose expansion rod and secure it into a vise. Push the hose onto the expansion rod and twist it several times. Place the coupling onto the expansion rod and push the hose over the stem. Make sure that the stem rests tightly against the back of the stem shoulder with no gaps. Now repeat the steps for the other side of the hose. The first machine we will be using is the Gates GC20 crimper. Using the tablet, select Crimp Hose Assembly. Scroll to C14 hose and select the appropriate size and coupling type. Ensure that the required die set is loaded onto the backup ring. Insert your hose assembly through the bottom and ensure that the ferrule is below the top of the die fingers. Place the die cone over the top of the die set and slide it to the back of the crimper until it comes into contact with the locating pins. Press and hold the crimp button on the tablet until the crimp is completed. Remove the die cone and hose assembly and measure your crimp diameter to ensure it is within tolerance.
Please note, C14 hose and couplings have a much tighter crimp tolerance than traditional hydraulic hose, so always compare your measurement to the tolerance displayed on eCrimp. The second machine we will be using is the Gates PC707 crimper. Once you have the proper crimp specifications, ensure that the required die set is loaded onto the backup ring. Insert your hose assembly through the bottom of the dies and ensure the ferrule is below the top of the die fingers. Place the cone over the top of the die fingers and slide it back until it comes into contact with the locating pins. Dial in the proper crimp settings using the knob on the switch box on the side of the crimper. Press and hold the crimp button until the actuator stops descending and immediately release. Remove the die cone and hose assembly and measure the crimp diameter to ensure it is within tolerance. Please note, C14 hose and couplings have a much tighter crimp tolerance than traditional hydraulic hose, so always compare your measurement to the tolerance displayed on eCrimp. The last machine we will be using is the MC420 crimper. Once you have the proper crimp specifications, ensure that the required die set is loaded into the MC420 crimper. Insert your hose assembly through the bottom of the dies and ensure the ferrule is below the top of the die fingers. Place the pressure plate on top of the die fingers. Dial in the proper crimp setting using the dial on the front of the crimper. Press and hold the crimp button on the handheld remote until the crimp actuator stops descending. Immediately release the button. Remove the pressure plate and hose assembly and measure the crimp diameter to ensure it is within tolerance. Please note, C14 hose and couplings have a much tighter crimp tolerance than traditional hydraulic hose, so always compare your measurement to the tolerance displayed on eCrimp.
Thank you very much for watching this assembly and crimp procedure for Gates C14 hose and couplings.